You were getting sky-high valuations. Investors were flying you around the country in private jets, and you were kind of told you're king.
This guy is Dylan Diamond. He's a 25-year-old who built the #2 most downloaded app on the App Store, Saturn, with millions of users. Last month, I had him at our studio and asked him to teach me everything he knows about how he became the youngest intern at Tesla and created one of the most viral apps in the US.
There was no marketing, and I didn't really think much of it at the time.
What do you think that the team has figured out that other consumer founders haven't been able to do?
It's not good enough to be a product that people use once a month. You want to be something that they're using 10 plus times a day.
How'd you become the youngest intern at Tesla?
I hacked together this Apple Watch app, iPhone app called Tesla Toolbox, and posted it in the Tesla Motors Club, and it went viral.
How did they originally reach out to you?
I remember on the phone, my age did not come up until the end when I said, I'm about to start senior year of high school. And they're like, whoa, you're young.
When did you decide to drop out of Penn and leave Tesla?
We took a trip out to California, and we were really fortunate to meet General Catalyst. He gave us a term sheet the next day. It was for $2.5 million, and that was like, wow.
Dylan, I want to start this interview with your early context. If I was around you when you were a teenager, would I have been able to know that you would be on the path that you are today?
Definitely with engineering and coding a lot. I think starting my own company probably, but back then I was just building tools for myself, building a lot of apps, super nerdy, and I don't think you'd be surprised. I'll say that.
What were some of those apps that you were building when you were younger, and how did you get interested in building apps?
So in 4th grade, I got my first MacBook, like the plastic 2008 white polyphane MacBook. And I was browsing Safari, clicked view source code, and discovered this whole new language that was, completely foreign to me, that later turned out to be HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And I was immediately transfixed that, as my dad explained, you could input instructions into the computer and it would output graphics and it would output whatever you want. And while my friends were playing Xbox and a ton of video games, I was not interested in that. But I started learning web development and built a web design company in 4th grade around static sites for therapists, nonprofits, friends of family. And I loved doing it. But I think the clients at the time felt bad that I was just coding these sites for free, so they'd pay me a couple $100. I soon realized I could make a business out of it and started scaling that up. And then later started building more dynamic web applications, think, content management systems for blogs and newsletters and things like that. And then my first iPhone app was for a project in 8th grade to educate younger students about the moon phases. And people made board games, videos, and I decided to make an iPhone app that told you the moon phase. Sounds very trivial, but it was my first project in Objective-C, first app on the App Store. And then my real first app that got more scale was called MyHack, and it was a online portal it integrated with an online portal to check your grades. So I went to a public school in Connecticut, and it used a software called Home Access Center. You probably went to a school where you could check your grades online. At the time, around 2012, it was not mobile optimized. So I had to learn web scraping. I had to learn Objective-C and build a tool for myself that allowed me to check my grades versus waiting in line at the desktops in the school library. So I built that for myself. And then my friends started saying, hey, Dylan, how are you able to, get this information in the classroom versus at the library? They wanted the app. So I put it on the App Store. My entire school, 2,000 kids got that first week. And then later I scaled it up to, thousands of schools across the country.
One of the apps that you built early on was a web app. It ended up turning into the Saturn that we know today. What was the story behind that? Why did you decide to create a school calendar app?
So that was a couple years later. It was a schedule sharing website, as simple as that sounds.
Yep.
And I was not the first kid to do this in the world. I was the first at my high school. But we all used Facebook really heavily at the time. And there was a moment twice a year in homeroom where you would get your paper schedule for the upcoming semester. And people would take a picture of it and post it on Facebook and say, like or comment if you have class with me. And this was a common ritual across every high school in the country. And even before Facebook, people were comparing notes about who they were sitting next to in class, because there's a lot of anxiety over, you're a freshman, you're at the high school, you don't know where to go, who to talk to. So I built a web app. It was really simple at the time, but it would auto-complete your courses, auto-complete your teachers, and you would input the period number, and it would match you with your classmates. And I, posted a link about that site in the school Facebook group. Every single kid in the school got on that. It was a web app, and it was used for the next year or so at the peaks of the semester. And then later, another problem that I had was the calendar was a mess in my high school. It ran on letter days. They were constantly rotating. There were early dismissals, and I thought there had to be a better solution. So I built an Apple Watch app. The Apple Watch had just come out at the time, an Apple Watch app to have the schedule on my phone, and then later paired it with the database of classes and sections that, from the other web product that everyone had. And that is what became iStaples. iStaples was a rudimentary calendar, schedule sharing tool, and friend finder for my community. And it also, like that, it spread word of mouth throughout the entire school.
Yeah, I heard that about 90% of the campus was using it. How did it spread?
Every day, yeah. And that was by the third year. The first year, it was like, 40, 50%. And it kind of, it was all word of mouth. And still, Saturn today grows mostly with the younger grades getting it as they get acclimated to high school. It's a rite of passage. It's a ritual. And in the schools where Saturn's really deep, and Staples back then, it was something you find out about from your older siblings, upperclassmen. It's the way to get around. You are lost without the product, and you come to trust it multiple times a day as your lifeline to know where to go. You walk in a new classroom, you don't know who to talk to. You pull out the app, it shows you where everyone is, what mutual classes you may have with them, and it contextualizes it a little bit. I think on a lot of other platforms, like, people try and pretend who they are and fabricate with fancy photo editing and, very polished content and videos. But on Saturn, it really is who you are relative to the community. And you can't fake that. It's your classes, your groups, your activities, your friends. And it tries to be very much that utility and friend finder and communicator. And that's kind of how it spread throughout the school. And I was on doing a few other college and working full time, but in the background, it was spreading all by word of mouth, no marketing.
I think if our podcast got 2,000 listeners off the bat day one and just started expanding rapidly, very quickly, I probably would have put the pedal to the metal, thought I was a genius, and start growing the show pretty quickly.
I did not think that. It was I got lucky, and I was used to every app I had built at that point just growing on its own, because it was building for myself. But it turns out that I am a stereotype of, a high schooler in my high school and many others. So whether it's checking your grades, your schedule, your friends, there was no marketing. And I didn't really think much of it at the time other than, hey, it's cool that my friends in my school are using this app.
So you mentioned you were working full time. You're actually working at Tesla, I believe, right?
Yep.
So building out their supercharging network, doing some of the back end engineering stuff for them. How'd you become the youngest intern at Tesla?
So around the same time that I was building this schedule sharing product, and again, I just got the Apple Watch, so I was really eager to build, new products on that surface. I was kind of introduced to Tesla. My parents had gotten a Model S at the time, 2015, and there were only 100,000 vehicles on the road back then. And I thought that it was more of a computer on wheels than a vehicle. And I'm not a car buff, but I am, a huge nerd. So this was really exciting to me that it was, this really sexy vehicle with an API and with an interface to the internet. So they got this car. I was really excited. I think I had my learner's permit. I couldn't even drive it on my own, but I hooked it up to my Wi-Fi network and was reverse engineering a lot of the API calls that the vehicle was communicating to mothership, which is what I would learn was Tesla's servers. And I discovered that there were a lot of undocumented endpoints that were not in their iPhone app at the time, like Summon, so you could move the car in and out of your garage, HomeLink. And at the time, Tesla's app was pretty simple. It was a bunch of buttons, flash the lights, honk the horn, open the sunroof, but that was about it. No map, no data, no sharing, and the API gave you all that data. So I basically built Strava or Garmin for Tesla on the Apple Watch. You could track where you're going, share rides with friends, talk about energy consumption, max speed, fun stats. And at the time, the community was really tight-knit, and everyone was sharing online in a forum called the Tesla Motors Club. So I hacked together this Apple Watch app, iPhone app called Tesla Toolbox. It was one of the first Apple Watch apps for Tesla at the time, and posted it in the Tesla Motors Club. And it went viral. It was like, 20,000 something people bought the app in the first month.
Was the app free or was
app was free, and then later made it paid. But I always thought, make it free to start because you just want to learn and talk to the community without any, negative feedback. I, was connected to Tesla, and I thought at first that it was going to be like a cease and desist interaction, but actually they were really intrigued with what I was building.
How did they originally reach out to you? Did they call you up or send you an email on your school email? Or
I'm trying to remember. I think it was an email. And I got on the phone through a recruiter. Then, as I would learn, they forward you internally to whatever team they think makes sense. And the Supercharger analytics team had a role. And I was like, I'm just going to get my foot in the door. And I remember on the phone, my age did not come up until the end when I said, I'm about to start senior year of high school. And they were like, whoa, you're young. And I was 17 during that phone call, later turned 18, and started working for them in May of 2017. And we were expanding so quickly at the time. I think we were, launching Model 3. The Supercharger network was doubling year over year. It was a really exciting time to be at the company during hypergrowth, especially when the entire world was betting against us. We were building cars on the weekends, trying to hit 5,000 vehicles a week. It was so scrappy and taught me a lot. But the people I worked with were incredible, and I had such free reign. If I had an idea, like building out this suite of software that now powers a lot of Tesla Energy called Network Maps, they just let me run with it, and you were able to build whatever you wanted. So it was a really fun opportunity.
It was funny. I try not to mention my age too much to potential clients unless they ask, or if I'm going to school, because I found is that if I mention my age, then they automatically discredit a little bit, take a little bit off of my knowledge. And then if I mention I'm going to school in the fall, in this case, then they're like, oh, well, are you sure you can run the business full time while you're in school? How did you think about that? Because I think you were over at Tesla, you were also in school, and then you're also building out the side.
I would later learn that your age is an asset and that people are eager to talk to you. Now I'm 25, feel very old. What happened was I was at Tesla and loving it. I was learning the most I would ever learn in such a short amount of time. Engineering, business relationships, product, technology, being able to, see Elon up close. It was just such an incredible experience for an 18-year-old. And I was in a dual degree program at the University of Pennsylvania, the M&T program, which is an amazing program. And the head of that is a Saturn advisor, and he's the best. But it was Wharton and engineering, so business and engineering. And I think that it was such a rigorous program. It really forced me to prioritize what I wanted to do, because you had to take double the amount of classes of any other Penn student and most, any other college student. And I was learning more at Tesla than in the engineering classroom. And I always wanted to optimize for learning. And I didn't feel stressed like other students for doing on-campus recruiting, because I had the job at Tesla. The colleagues at Tesla were teaching me so much. And I was, writing like, production level software for arguably the coolest company in the world from my dorm room. And that was really exciting. And I would be in the classroom VPNing into Tesla, writing code. And there were some great courses, but I was just like, hey, I'm not going to give up this opportunity at Tesla. I want to take it with me, even though I'm at school too. So I was flying back and forth between Philly and San Francisco to go at Tesla, working around the clock, had no free time. It was really fun though.
What would you say, you mentioned you were learning a lot at Tesla, even more than you were at an Ivy League program. What would you say are like some of the most important things that you learned that you implemented when starting your own company?
The bar of talent at Tesla for engineering is so high. So being able to look for that. At Tesla didn't have, excess capital. So you had to really be scrappy. And being, and when Saturn started, we were self-funding it, Max and I. At Tesla, when I was building software, there was no designer. I was the designer. I was the tester. I was the user. Back then, it was a one-man show. So at least what I was building. So I took a lot of that with me and was able to, make sure that, one, it's a best-in-class product, and Teslas look really good, but they're also best-in-class engineering. Oftentimes, you have one or the other.
Your co-founder, Max, how did you meet him? What's the story?
He actually pinged me on LinkedIn, as Wharton kids would do. And he read an article in the Daily Pennsylvanian, the school newspaper, about I was the youngest employee at Tesla. I'd built an app for Penn. And he said, "Hey, I'm the youngest, managing director at Havas, big marketing firm, worked with brands like Coca-Cola, Beats, T-Mobile. And he was also not in a frat, prioritizing his work over school, and thought we would bond. So he invited me over, and we just talked for hours, spitballing ideas back and forth, talking about, each other's different careers, very complementary skill set. He was all marketing and, up and out, and I was very much an engineer, much more kind of introverted at the time, and very focused on just building things that I like to use. And it was a good mix. And we didn't know right away what we were going to build, but eventually we started looking at the Google Analytics data for that scheduling product, iStaples. And he saw that step function of, 50% daily active users over enrollment to about 90%. And he said, "Dylan, you have to bring this to another school." And it took some convincing because I was doing the dual degree and Tesla. But on the weekends, we would build this, and we decided to take it to my cousin's high school. And that was when we kind of got signal, when half that school downloaded in the first day, that we had something.
So when you realize you have something, you start picking up traction from additional schools like the one you mentioned.
Yeah.
What are the next steps do you go to? Do you decide, hey, I want to raise capital, or what do you go to?
Definitely not. And I would advise any young founder listening to delay raising capital as much as possible. And we were lucky in that we were both working full time, so we were able to self-fund the business for server costs, for interns, for operations, things like that. And we got to, it was like one additional school from Staples, then two, then three, then four, and they kept seeing the same type of performance in the first 48 hours. And we didn't have any validator. I didn't even know metrics like D30 retention, DAO MAU, the stickiness, and the penetration in each campus. I just thought it was really cool that a product that I built for myself had spread not just to my school, but started spreading to dozens of schools, and that people loved it as much as I did. But Max was much more commercial, and we went to New York and we met with some mentors and advisors, and they thought that the growth was really explosive, and they hadn't seen anything like that in consumer for a long time.
What would be your advice to maybe other founders in the audience? Because I see a lot of founders that sometimes I might be at an event every once in a while, and a founder would come up to me. I ask what they're building, and they're like, "Oh no, we're raising capital for what we're building right now." I'm like, "Did you build anything yet?" It's like, "No, we need the money to build." And I'm like,
"So you have all the tools at your disposal, especially now with AI and LLMs building for you that we did not have back then." That you really don't need capital in the beginning. And I would argue capital makes finding product market fit harder because you have more stakeholders and people, and you have to worry about shareholders and company structure, capital structure. Whereas with us, it was just, do kids like it? Do they not? And each additional school we would go to, we would modify the product to suit their needs. And it was not scalable at all, but it was something that really helped us. In the early days, it was Max, myself, Mason, who's incredible, our first kind of intern, later took a year off school, fellow student at Penn, a couple other interns. And, we were just having so much fun doing it. The huge TV in the apartment would have real-time analytics, and we'd see it go from like 0 to 500, concurrent users at one school. And that was, so thrilling to us. And I'd never raised capital before, so it wasn't even a consideration. I think a lot of kids think, do I need to go to YC? Do I need to raise capital? I knew zero venture capitalists. I had not even thought about going to YC. It was either school or Tesla full-time. And this was a fun weekend project.
When did you decide to drop out of Penn and leave Tesla? And then how did your parents and people around you think about that?
So I was coding day and night, trying to keep up with school, Tesla, and what would become Saturn. And that was taking up increasingly more time. And Max was starting to talk to a lot of VCs. And we took a trip out to California with no intention of raising capital, went to LA and then went to SF and just started pitching. We made a deck before and, working on that in the hotel room late at night before we raised. And we were really fortunate to meet General Catalyst, and Nico Bonazzos there did Snapchat Series B, one of the really good consumer investors. And we met him and we just had a good conversation. It didn't feel like a pitch meeting. And he gave us a term sheet the next day. It was for, I think $2.5 million. And that was like, wow, we did not expect that before, because all the venture checks were like, $25K, whatever. and we didn't take any of those. There wasn't really a decision about leaving school or not. I think back then the decision was, are we going to work on this during the summer or not? There was this big decision about, do we stay at our full-time jobs, Tesla and Havas, throughout the summer, or do we do this? And then when we got that term sheet, it was much more clear that, wow, we have a big opportunity, and people who are really good investors find this exciting. We should keep working on it. And we thought that we couldn't hire a team around us if we weren't fully in it, because that wouldn't be fair. If the founders weren't committed, the founders were doing school, and you want to hire people who are going to put their life on the line to build this with you and be your teammates.
Yeah, you talked a lot about having to spend a lot of time working at Tesla, also at school, also trying to build out the company. I know about 2 years ago, I spent time doing also multiple other projects all at once. I was working at Columbia Business School, was also working at a venture fund part-time, and was also trying to scale out this podcast, and then was also working at a startup running operations for them for a little bit. I thought I was genius trying to do everything at once, but I soon figured out that by spending so much time on so many different things, that sacrificed the quality of work for all of those things. So I realized I wanted to try to be number one in at least one or two of those things. But I realized to do that, you can't really have a lot of balance, at least not in your life. How have you thought about balance in your life, or do you think it can exist as a startup founder?
So look, we say time is the most valuable resource. You cannot buy more of it. And it's what democratizes every single one of us on the planet. So the most important decision that one makes on a daily basis is how to spend their time. And that's the whole mission behind Saturn. Give people the tools to empower them with information so that they can make the best decisions on how they spend their time. And I think balance is really important. And at school, it's something I struggled with, in that there was zero free time with courses, with Tesla. As I said, my co-founder and I were not in Greek life, and we really were strapped for time. And now it's something that is really important, working on personal relationships, fitness. It makes you better at the company. And then within the company, balance is important. For the first few months after raising that first round, and later then when Kotu joined in, I wasn't recruiting. I should have been. I was coding day and night until 5 a.m. every night. Go home, sleep for a couple hours, go back to the office, actually right around the corner here. And it was helpful, but I wasn't building, a company. I was just building a product, and the money was sitting idle in the bank account. And you want to be conservative, but you also want to scale yourself, and you want to focus on the things that only you can do that other people can't, and empower them. You work for them. So unblock them, hire people better than you at engineering, at marketing, at design, and then, continue to unblock them and spend your time wisely. That's been certainly a learning over the last couple of years, and I've, plenty more to learn and keep going. But that's also helped create more balance and time, focusing on yourself professionally. I have a great executive coach that's been with me for 5+ years as a great mentor. So those are just some ways to create balance.
And now Saturn has millions of users all across the United States. What were some of the things that you and the team did to grow from maybe the few thousand users that you had at a couple of those schools all the way up to the scale that you're at today?
So we leveraged an ambassador network for both acquisition, but primarily product learning and user research, so that when we would go to a school in a new market, new geo, we didn't empathize with the users as much as the Northeast public schools where I grew up. So we would work with them. We would understand what is important about the product for them, whether it's building more social features, whether it's doubling down on utility, and then they would, plant the seeds. And Saturn grows year over year. So if you get the app, you're maybe more excited to get it as a freshman, sophomore than a junior or senior. But by the time that freshman or sophomore grows up and becomes a senior, their engagement is the same. But then you have 3 to 4 other new grades, new cohorts that get the app. So that's why the schools grow year on year. And it took us some time to identify that growth model as part of our business, but we really lean into it. And right about now is the back to school season, which is when we go to the top of the app store, densify schools. They grow year on year. And at first, we wanted the growth to be linear to exponential throughout the entire year. It's very exponential, but packed into like a 6-week period. And we got comfortable with that and used it as an asset versus something that we wanted to work on. And the ambassador network, we didn't really do any paid marketing for the first 2 to 3 years of the company. We do a little bit now just to seed schools, given how much time young people spend on those platforms, which I think is a separate issue we can get into. But it's really about word of mouth, invitations, making it a product that users are eager to share with their friends.
And let's get into that. Why not? What's wrong with social media today?
So I think social media it was built to be a connector, but the business models behind traditional social media and mobile are all contingent on minutes spent, inventory, and scrolling. So what I mean by that is every product that you might think of when you think of social media, it's designed to get you to keep scrolling for more minutes per day, because they can serve you more ads, and then they make more money, average revenue per user. And they just want that reinforcement loop. So keep showing you more of the same things that you like. What started as something that was a strong tie graph based around friendship has dissolved into something based on weak ties, and showing you content that is recommended versus content that you decided to follow. And that's been great for business models because you can inject ads, and the recommendation engines behind ads are very strong. But it's been terrible for young people and their mental health, because these products are reinforcement loops, and they get you to stay scrolling, and you are focused on this glass rectangle you hold, not actually out in the real world. You are focused on connecting with people you don't know and connecting with creators, and that creates FOMO. You are not focused on strengthening ties with your real friends. And I think that my age group skipped TikTok, but we very much had Instagram. And I know from talking with our high school users today just how much of a problem those products are in school, and how distracting they are. They create anxieties. You have the lookalike effect, where you see all these people on the feeds and they're not actually your friends, but you feel bad that you're not emulating them, as closely as you want. I think we're not on the right track where people are using their phones as a tool to enable them and empower them. I think young people, specifically, teens, are using their phones in ways that just continue to isolate themselves from their communities. And Saturn did not start out as a product to intentionally solve that. It started out as the best calendar for myself, my friends, and then now, millions of high schoolers. But I really think that we give you time back in your day, and we don't take it out of your day. We don't track it internally as a core business KPI. And we think that the calendar should be for your friends, your community, helping you discover things going on, see where your friends will be, help you spend your time, not a place where you go when you're bored and just want to scroll. And I will say that the business models of those other companies are contingent on minutes. We feel really proud that we've created a new business model and type of ad unit where it's not based on minutes, and it's not based on the number of times you scroll and inventory. So that's all I can say on that for now. But I feel excited that we've kept that ethos as our North Star, and did not, try and build something anonymous, creating, loneliness and bullying. And instead, we want to get you out in the real world, and we want you using the product frequently, because it means you're a daily utility, a lifeline that they can depend on. But we don't care how long you spend using it. In fact, if you're successful on Saturn, you should find what you want quickly, and not need to, waste time scrolling.
Yeah, when we've had conversations, you've consistently kept at the forefront, like you are now, is that Saturn's here to save people time, not take away
there's
from
no addictive algorithms designed to keep you on your phone. They don't want to surface the content of your friends quickly. They want to show you random things so that you spend more time scrolling.
Why do you care about saving time at all? Because technically, wouldn't you think that if you were a true capitalist, right, like you would try to keep people on the platform as much as possible?
But I didn't start the product as a capitalist. I built the first app as a 16-year-old high school kid, and then later as a sophomore in college. So I didn't set out to build a company, to build a business. I set out to build a tool and a really fun product for me, my school, my friends. And I think that it's challenging, but you can build something that users will actually give you more credit for, and could be a really compelling business opportunity. So obviously we want to do well by our shareholders. And I think that what we've come up with is much stronger than trying to compete on the same vertical as, say, the top 4 social media products, which are all direct response vertical video ads. We don't want to be that. Users are also fatigued. They don't need more feeds. You look at the convergence between platforms they all have the same content. They all have the same formats. You know the apps I'm talking about. They're vertical video feeds, and they all are, pretty much the same. And we just want to build something more unique. And I do think users will reward us for doing that.
So what are some of the ways that Saturn now makes money?
Later this year, we'll be able to talk more about that. But it's all through the calendar. It's about showing you content that you will interact with in the real world, not just on a device, and be able to do that with your community. So imagine a bunch of people around the lunch table in a school cafeteria. Everyone whips out their TikTok. Everyone's going to see different ads. There's no conversation around those ads. They're very personalized to you, which could work well in that type of business model. But I think with Saturn, we care about creating conversation around content in the real world. And we want to build something where you open it, you can connect with others around that piece of content and form micro communities around that content. I think it is a different take, but it reminds people maybe of an earlier internet and of in real life, advertising and content.
Are there, I guess, any period of time when you were building the company or even in your business career that was more difficult than others or really difficult that you had to push through? If so, what was it and how did you push through?
Yeah. So COVID shut down every high school in the country. And for a product that operates mostly during the school day, that was really challenging. And we had capital in the bank, but it was not good for morale when all the DAO, basically daily active users, went to zero, and we didn't know when people were going to come back. We iterated. We built a Chromebook app. We built a virtual yearbook. We did a bunch of things. I think in retrospect, it was good for morale, but it was not. We didn't know what was happening. So with the information we had at the time, I would not have changed our course. But I think that for a company that's about getting people together, leveraging their community graphs, when you're at home, you aren't with your community, and it's harder. We saw the rise of the friend finder apps in the App Store that kind of died off. And Saturn, again, we didn't want to pivot. We didn't want to build anything anonymous. We didn't want to connect you with random people. So we stayed the course, but it was really challenging for that period. And then luckily, the world has bounced back in a big way.
What do you wish you knew when you first started the business?
Things take time, in that we had a lot of momentum early on, from going from one school to 12 to 24 to 50. And we also raised capital very quickly because investors were excited by this new way of connecting people through the calendar, and that we were building a calendar that was not an enterprise tool, but that resonated with Gen Z and young people. But keeping laser focus is important. And there are a lot of products, which I won't name, but you probably know, social apps that have exploded virally and then, died in a, kind of big way because they're ephemeral and they're fads. And we had a lot of pressure from investors to follow those apps and to build features like that. When crypto was huge in 21, there was pressure to put NFTs into Saturn and build our, product on the blockchain. But for the application, for the user, there was no benefit to that. And it would have been a lot of engineering lift. And I think in that respect, we stayed the course. But in other areas, we got distracted trying to replicate messaging apps and build features that weren't core to the ethos of Saturn. So I would give myself the advice of just, Hadi, again, the person I mentioned earlier, has said it well, which is build the calendar infrastructure for every high school in America. That's your moat. That's your retention. The rest will follow. And that has paid off, but I wish we maybe didn't zigzag as much. But you got to do it. It's part of the learning process.
You mentioned much earlier in the podcast and that you were meeting with advisors and people and mentors in New York City, and they were particularly interested in Saturn because they haven't seen an explosion in growth in the consumer sector in a long time. What do you think that you or the team has figured out when building a consumer company that other consumer founders haven't been able to figure out?
A few things. There's a cold start problem in consumer. And if you build something for utility, you can guarantee retention. And it's not good enough to be a product that people use once a month, once a week, even like a couple times a week. You want to be something that they're using 10 plus times a day, because then they put you on the home screen of their phone, they depend on you, and you are, part of their daily rituals. And I think that you can count the apps on one hand that you use on a daily basis. And for us, Saturn is one of them for our high school users. And building single player utility has also differentiated us and allowed us to stay focused and not get distracted. Obviously, we're not a single player utility and the product grows virally. So it's not something like a calculator, but it's also not, a random messaging product. And by building in utility, you can guarantee that retention, which gives you enough shots on goal to test consumer features to see if they're going to work or if they're not going to work without worrying about churn. Most consumer products, they're betting on the graph and the multiplayer features from day one. And then you deal with the reverse K factor problem, which is if you tell me to join a product, I will join. That's a K factor. Think about the letter K, user in, user out. But the reverse K factor is when you stop using the product, I will stop using it. Think of products like Clubhouse, a bunch of other photo messaging apps that kind of came and went, well built, but they, in terms of Clubhouse's case, easily, repeatable. Twitter did it, Spotify did it. And then with all those other products, they rely on your friends using them. There's zero single player retention. So if your friend stops using it or maybe misses a day taking a picture, you're going to churn.
Interesting. For a couple of closing questions, but before we wrap up the interview, one, what is your greatest failure and what did you learn from it?
It's a good question. I think during 2021, it was easy to get tempted and not stay grounded because you were getting sky high valuations and investors were flying you around the country in private jets and you were, kind of told you're king when you're not. And it was more about what if than actuals. So I think getting distracted is something that the last couple of years have been really humbling around just staying focused, staying in the trenches, building. The Saturn team is amazing, and I'm extremely grateful and privileged to learn alongside them every day. There have been people we've hired that didn't work out. I think you always learn from that. It's an iterative process. So those, definitely a lot of learnings, failures along the way. Product features aren't always going to work, but you want to bounce back and make sure that the core value prop is strong. And, I think sometimes not taking things personally and being a little more lighthearted and fun along the journey is advice that I would give myself many times.
How do you stay grounded during some of those moments?
I would just look at the big guys and say, we're not that yet. And, focus on the unit economics and fundamentals around the product and just say, look, we got a long ways to go. Never get too high, never get too low, and stay the course.
And for our last question, if I slid you over a phone and you could call your 16-year-old self, would you call? And if so, what would you say?
Would I call? I would not change advice. It's kind of a freaky question. I don't think I would call because, he would have to figure it out for himself. And, I think back then all I wanted to do was get into Stanford and that didn't happen. So I feel like, wouldn't want to spoil the surprise. And I'm happy with the track. Maybe I would just say, don't worry about the future and the unknowns. But I probably wouldn't make that call. I'd probably just, stay the course. I think that I use this analogy a lot. I think rather than think about like a now playing bar with a music app, your track of life is not written. You're always at the end, more like a live streaming track. You can't just skip ahead. It's not predetermined. So I wouldn't want to really tempt fate there.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great way to end it. Thanks, Dylan, for taking the
time
to
so
come
much
on the show. We'll have a link to Saturn in the episode description down below. If you haven't yet checked it out, it'll be there. And thanks for joining.
Thank you.